So if you watched my last video, you saw us make this awesome, just simple, basic work positioning lanyard for tree climbing. And in this video, I'm going to be going more in depth on the different materials you can use to build your personal lanyard system, and some of the benefits and I don't know, pros and cons of using different systems. And we got a lot here for you today. I got like steel core lanyards, I got my regular work lanyards, I got my recreational tree climbing lanyard I usually use, my lightweight setup, and I also got something I just cooked up today, which is this super long lightweight recreational tree climbing lanyard that's basically like a really mini double rope system. They're all miniature double rope systems, but this is like a long one. So let's check some of these out and let's get into it. So the first thing I'm going to talk about is rope, the different textile materials that we use. So you got 3 different kinds of rope if you're a tree climber, if you're any kind of climber looking for climbing lines. You got but basically tree climber. You got 16 strand rope, you got 24 strand rope, and you have Kern mantles. Now, Kern mantles are found everywhere in every type of climbing, rock climbing, access, rescue, and they're pretty much the main go-to for all of those. The reason they are not the go-to for tree climbing is because most of them cannot be spliced, and a lot of tree climbers, we still climb in double rope systems a lot. When you're recreational tree climbing, this is not as common. Usually you're climbing with single rope systems, but when you're climbing with double rope systems, it's super nice to be able to have a spliced termination at the end of your line. It makes life a lot easier, and it's super nice. It's way stronger than a knot. It's usually as strong as the rope itself, so it's the strongest connection you could have other than a sewn termination. And it's possible to do yourself if you're willing to spend the time to learn how to do that. Whereas with Kern mantles, it's not as possible, not always as safe, and you know, it's really nice to be able to have those. So for that reason, I do not usually use Kern mantle ropes for my lanyard systems. In this basic lanyard system I made, this is a Kern mantle rope. The reason you might choose a Kern mantle rope, even though you can't splice it, you can get sewn terminations if you buy them that way. Very low profile, very much easier than a knot to retrieve through a tight union in a tree, especially if you're a long ways away with it. That's where that's really nice. However, the downside is, yeah, you have to use knots. But the upside to a Kern mantle rope is they're usually very, very abrasion resistant. And you can also get Kern mantle ropes like this, which are made from aramid fibers, or things that are super heat resistant and also super abrasion and cut resistant. Now, not cut resistant as in they're going to resist being cut by your kind of silky saw. They still will be cut by that, especially if they're under tension. Ropes under tension just disappear when you cut them with something. So don't think that it's going to resist being cut by a handsaw if you have a rope like this. Probably is a little bit better. However, I've still damaged this when I use this as a lanyard. It still has damage point from a silky. Maybe not as bad, but I've never gotten anything worse on a regular polyester rope. But they can be more abrasion resistant, and they can usually be stronger. So if that's something you're really looking for, if that makes your head game better, knowing that this is good for like 9,000 pounds instead of like the 5,600 pounds that this rope is good for, then good on you, just go for that, even though, you know, it's technically not as strong. But you know, it's nice to be able to splice stuff. So for that reason, I don't really ever use Kern mantle ropes as my lanyard adjusters anymore, because I really prefer to have spliced terminations. Sewn terminations are good. They're a little bit cheaper if you're having it done by somebody else. If they have that sewing machine, they can usually bang those out pretty quick. They're usually not cheaper. Usually it's about the same price. But splices are like the most low profile thing you can get, and they just look nice. They just look so good. And they're just really easy to retrieve when you're pulling them back through the tree, when you undo your lanyard and you're pulling it back to yourself. So I will always go with spliced terminations. Both 24 strand ropes and 16 strand ropes are spliceable. The reason that I prefer a 24 strand rope is just it's a little bit smoother in the hand, and that makes it a little bit more abrasion resistant. 16 strand ropes are known for being very durable, but I just find that they look like they've worn a little bit quicker. They are easier, like from a knowledge standpoint, to splice. So if you just want to learn how to splice something, 16 strands definitely the way to go. Especially if you do it right, you know all the tricks to doing it. It's just a simple straight back bury usually, and very safe, very strong ropes. I just like how 24 strands feel just a little bit better, and I like the way that they splice, even though it's a little bit harder to do, takes a little bit more effort. I do like 24 strand splices a lot. So all of my lanyards are pretty much 24 strand, other than my wire core lanyard. So that being said, that's the one thing that we didn't have on here. I would basically call it a Kern mantle because you are getting all the strength from the core, no strength from the sheath. Basically, wire core flip line is we have this textile sheath, which all that does is it allows your various adjusters to be able to hold on to it if you choose to use a prusik cord. I would prefer a rope grab, but we'll get into the adjustment systems later. But basically, a wire core rope is you just have this polyester textile sheath that's just swaged, crimped on to the splice in the wire itself. And there are a couple benefits to this particular textile, or whatever you want to call it. First of all, it is cut resistant. Ropes are everything's cut resistant, I guess, but ropes aren't. Ropes will go in the blink of an eye if you hit them with a chainsaw. You are never going to cut through this with a handsaw, and when you're using a chainsaw, you can cut it, but if you're using like a top handle saw, especially if you have a thicker one, this is a 5/8, so it's a little bit stronger and a little bit easier to work up the tree, but they are very heavy. So, but yes, cut resistant. You can watch plenty of videos. People will cut through them with chainsaws, but you actually get to make the mistake. You can cut it and be like, oh, and then be like, not do it again, I guess, and switch over to a different system. But you don't say cut proof because you can't cut through it, but it's pretty close. Might as well be. So maybe not a big saw, maybe a big saw could rip through these pretty fast, but it's super nice. So other than being cut resistant, the other thing that's great about it is if you are climbing conifers and stuff like that, where one, it's also nice to have something cut resistant because you are cutting usually from the ground all the way to the top. Deciduous trees, usually you find yourself climbing up on your buck strap maybe, but then once you set your tie-in, you're working off your tie-in and your buck strap, so it's easy to always be tied in twice. You should always be tied in twice, but when you're using these, since you're working off of your lanyard positioning system the whole time, that's where your main support is, and then your primary lifeline is under you, girth hitched on the tree. It's just nice to have that peace of mind that you're not going to lose your balance, because you're not going to cut all the way through this. So if you like bump it, you're not going to like snap, fall, and then maybe hurt yourself more. So it's just really nice for that, because when you're working spruce, pine, you're cutting much closer to your lanyard than you would be in pretty much any other tree. So that's just super nice. And if you're working around something with a super huge stem, because it has this wire core, it's very rigid, so it's very easy to work up those larger stems. It's not going to get all caught and hung up in the bark like a rope lanyard would. It's easy to roll it around, get it to keep advancing up the tree. So it's nice for conifers if you're climbing conifers a lot. I think everybody's truck has a place for one of these. I think everybody could use a wire core flip line. Probably not all the time. I don't use it all the time, but I definitely take this out every time that I do like a spruce tree. Usually I try to do this every time I do a spruce tree or a pine or something like that. This is really, really nice to have. So some people might be your everyday, but because it's heavy and a little bit unruly, it's kind of not nice to have as like your lanyard all the time if you're pruning like a maple tree or something. It's not. It's heavy, kind of a little bit cumbersome to move around, so it's nice to have a rope lanyard. The other thing is if you're climbing trees with really thin bark, since it is so rigid, it's not going to grab on if you were to gaff out. So if you gaffed out and you didn't have your second system on yet because you're just spurring up, you're not cutting anything, so you're climbing a poplar tree or like madrone, something with really smooth bark, or like sycamore, whatever, eucalypt, it's not going to catch really on the way down. You're probably going to fall for a little while. Even with red pines that are slippery, or you could fall for a while. I've gaffed out with these on a red pine and it's still grabbed on just fine. So, you know, it feels a little bit spookier, but it's just really nice to have for those situations, but maybe not for a poplar tree. But those are kind of all the different materials we have. Now, for what goes on the end of your lanyard, if you're doing tree work, you're required to have something that's double auto locking. The only thing that's not double auto locking that a lot of people use are these rope grabs. These are technically not double auto locking because the double requires 2 unique actions before the gate can be opened. On these you can just see you have that spine safety and then the gate just opens. So that's not technically double auto locking, but I guess people have just been working with them long enough and not had issues, so they're probably something that just kind of got grandfathered into. You can get ones of these that are double auto locking. I don't like them personally. I would rather use one of these, but since I do like being safer, I would rather just not use a rope snap at all and just use a double auto locking carabiner. Now what's important is that you're able to use these quickly and easily, because when you're using a positioning system, it's really nice to be able to operate it with one hand. So if you're not really experienced with double auto locking carabiners yet, you don't have the techniques down to just open it without looking at it, just feel it and just open it. It can be a little difficult to learn with a lanyard that has a double auto locker on there. So if you're a beginner, it's definitely really nice to start with a rope snap just because it's so easy and intuitive to open. But now where I'm at, I just feel much more comfortable using a double auto locking carabiner. It just feels safer, and now I can use them pretty quickly. So I would just prefer to have that. But if you're not used to this slide up and twist that pretty much every auto locking carabiner is, there is another option. This is a Petzl ball lock, which this is on my work lanyard. It is much easier to open with one hand, in my opinion, but I think everybody would find this a little bit easier if you know how it works. So you have this blue or green little ball that when you press that down, then it allows you to twist the gate and open the carabiner. I find this super easy to do with one hand, especially when you're not looking and fumbling around. And I would highly recommend this if you want something a little bit safer than a rope snap. I would consider it a little safer than a rope snap, I guess. And but still easy to open with one hand so that you can be holding on, stabilizing yourself while you're working to get your positioning lanyard on. Now, going on from that, let's get to where all the other spice and variations are with the positioners. So I kind of pointed this out before, but this is what I would consider my recreational lanyard, and then this is my work lanyard. So both of these are 24 strand ropes. One is thicker than the other, but they are both still acceptable to use at work as work positioning lanyards because they meet the 5,400 pound requirement in the textile for the ANSI standards. And also they are 11 to 13 mil. I forgot to talk about this when I was talking about ropes, but I'll bring it up here real quick. Whereas this fun little lanyard I made, this rope is rated to 7,000 pounds, but it is a 10 mil rope, so this technically I don't think would be allowed in work use, but I can use it wreck climbing all I want. You can use whatever you want wreck climbing as long as you consider it safe enough. You know, it's up to you. Because I'm used to climbing with work rated gear, I would prefer to always just use that. But if it's anything that's accepted as a lifeline anywhere else, you can probably apply it to tree climbing. Just use your best judgment. But if you want to use somebody else's judgment, then use stuff that's rated for tree work if you don't want to think about it too much. Once you know a lot and you want to go outside the boundaries a little bit when you're climbing on your own, then, you know, go nuts with whatever you can deem safe for you to use. But I personally still feel better using work gear. So now we're done with that, let's go back to adjustment systems. So we have our most basic adjustment system, what I said probably like 70-80% of people use, which is just a micro pulley and a prusset. This just works really well. It's super nice. You can pull out slack super easily with one hand, and probably one of the biggest differences that I will point out between different adjustment systems is whether or not they can be released under load. So since this is basically just a small double rope system, if I'm sitting back into it, putting all of my weight into it, and I need to transition my weight to my climbing line, especially if you're climbing like say a maple trees with branches super far apart, you might be hanging on your buck strap as opposed to just kind of standing on the tree and only putting a little bit of your weight into it to keep you upright. Especially if you're a less experienced climber. I know I was doing a lot of static transitions between my lanyard system and my primary system. You know, I didn't feel comfortable just untying and just hopping into my primary lifeline without like waiting it being like, is it working? And then do it. But now I can do all those safety checks before I hop into it and feel confident that it is going to hold me. You know, when you first start, this could hold up a small car, but you don't trust it to hold up yourself. So, you know, whatever. So it's super nice to have something that can be released under load. So this system, you could release it if you're just sitting back into it in this regular lanyard double rope configuration. Some systems you cannot. For example, on this flip line, I have what you call a rope grab. This is a super versatile piece of gear. Basically, it's what you would usually call an ascender, but we'll call it a rope grab because it can travel one way up the rope, and then when it's weighted, this cam will grab it and it stays closed. Now this, you have to pretty much have all your weight off of it before you can depress it with your thumb and give out slack. So this is not a super good adjustment tool for beginners, but the upside to this is the reason it's on my wire core is because, you know, it is also cut resistant. Like, I mean, it's a big, huge, chunky block of aluminum. It's probably as cut resistant as the lanyard. So I can trust that it's going to be solid, whereas if I'm using a long prusik, yeah, this is pretty cut resistant, but that prusik is not. So, you know, and I feel like if I'm going to cut my lanyard, it's going to be closer to me when I'm kind of like, I don't know, setting the saw down. I'm not really that worried about cutting the backside of my lanyard unless it's a really big tree and I have to use a big saw or something and I'm not as aware as I should be of where my lanyard is, then maybe. But so there's that. It's, you know, cut resistant unlike just a regular prusik cord, but also it's going to work really well with sap because you just have two moving parts. This can all be easily cleaned off with whatever you want to use because it's just metal. You can probably put whatever you want on this to get all the sap off and clean it off before you put it back on your climbing line, which can be said for all mechanicals, but I just feel like this is simple. It's just a piece of, that's a piece of gear right there. So like you can beat this thing up, it's still gonna work, it's gonna work forever, and it's just not gonna change its function from the as advertised. So that's super nice. It'll deal with sap well, so it's already suited well for all those conifers you're gonna be climbing with a wire cord. But yeah, that's super nice that it just cleans off really well. Your hitch cord will start to really bind up if it gets covered in sap, and so will other mechanicals, especially ones that emulate hitch cord, not a zigzag, but a Xeon or whatever. So between my rec climbing lanyard and my work climbing lanyard, I basically have different versions of a similar device. These are both camming devices, where this is modeled more after an ascender, and this is basically like a one-piece ascender. So this is the Petzl Grion. This is a pretty old model one. Looks like the original Gree, but this can be released under load, and just like that prusik cord, it could also be released under load as a single strand. Since this is modeled after the Gree, the same model thing is being used in single rope systems. So if you, instead of using this like a regular lanyard, you had just chokered this around the tree, and you just have a single strand running back to the device that's clipped to you, you can pop that handle out if you need some extra releasing leverage. Usually you can just press on the top with your thumb to pay slack out like that. But if you need that extra oomph to get your weight off, you can grab that lever and pull it out, and that'll really allow you to descend. So this is super nice too. I haven't noticed this getting gummed up by sap at all either. Really simple device. Still some moving parts. Looks a little bit more complicated than the rope grab, but this would still be really easy to clean. It isn't the most complex descender. It's a good idea because a lot of people are familiar with how this style of device works. So you could put this with most people and they would understand how to use this descender. rope access or tree work. Now, my pretty sweet lighter weight version is the Petzl Adjust, which this is for more lightweight lanyard work. Here, let's get this done. But you can see this is super simple. It's just one piece of aluminum, really easy to use. Basically, you just can release tension by just tilting the device and allowing it to be paid through, and then to take out slack, it's the same as any other device, can be done with one hand. You're just pulling on it. But this just grabs really nice, reliably, no creep in it at all. And it's just super simple and really small. Like it's just so nice. Like I don't think there's any descender really lighter, or any lanyard adjuster lighter than this. This is just, I love this thing. This is probably my favorite lanyard that I use, but I haven't dirtied it all up and taken it to work yet. This is just super nice. And something else I'll point out is with these 24 strand ropes, I splice both sides, but a splice is probably not really considered like technically a blocker. On a 24 strand rope, it is double the width diameter, the diameter of the rope at the splice. So it will not go through this positioner, but you know, to keep it real safe, I just keep it clipped back to the carabiner that the adjuster is on. But I clip it on the inside, since I wear this on the right side of my body. I keep the splice clipped on the inside, so when I reach to grab a rope to pull the slack out, I'm grabbing the tail strand of the adjuster, not this splice. That'd be quite frustrating. But yeah, so these are all the lanyards I've used, and I really like them. I personally, one more comment about rope length, is I'll usually make my lanyards 10 to 12 feet, usually 12 feet, because when they're doubled up, since I have the tail clipped to me and I have the carabiner clipped to me when I'm not using them, if I even out the strands, even out the strands and have it clipped to my harness, when I'm standing up working on the ground, it's not coming past the hem of my pant, so I'm not stepping on my lanyard when I'm walking around the job site if I just get out of the tree to grab something or go to help on the ground real quick. So that's super, super nice. And if I want to make it shorter, keep it out of the way better, I just throw a overhand knot in it, and that's how it's usually stored on my harness. Really quick, easy, no messing around. I just think that works really great. And then we got this fun little guy right here. This is just my little curio. I've seen other people do things like this, and I just wanted to try it. So we got 30 feet of 10 mil ocean poly, and then it's kind of like a mini Teufelberger lanyard in here. We got just some 8 mil ocean poly going between the DMM Pinto pulley like that, which is super cool, and then using the Beckett as my attachment point for the other end. So you got this cool long lanyard. I see people liking long lanyards when they're climbing large trees, and it's nice to have a lanyard that's more equivalent to a second double rope system, like if you're climbing a pretty spread out tree. I just haven't needed that in a long time. I get by fine with just on my main climbing line and a 10-12 foot lanyard. So, but this is fun. I'm gonna try this out. But this is like super small stuff going on all around here, super compact, and this is just kind of fun. I can't wait to find a little application for this in some rec climbing, but all kinds of fun stuff. Maybe I'll make a video when I find a good tree to use this in. But yeah, that's all I got for my lanyards. If you have any questions on anything that I showed, or if I've had any experience with other gear, this is pretty much all the gear I've ever used. There isn't really anything in this video that I haven't used as a lanyard adjuster. But if you have any questions, please let me know, and I hope this was informative if you're making another lanyard or looking to upgrade the one you have. But yeah, all these are really great. I like using the Grion and that Petzl Connect Adjust. But yeah, hope you enjoyed, and can't wait to catch you in the next video. For the video, got our fun white pine. Whoa, that might work. Secure in the package. Here it comes.
studio.